My guest is Eric Abetz, who's long been the leading national political voice from Tasmania. He was formerly a minister and senator and leader of the government in the Senate, and he's just been elected to the Tasmanian Parliament, leading the Liberal vote in Franklin, which, like Tasmanian electorates, elects a number of MPs. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you very much for having me, David, and it's good to be back in harness.
It's delightful. If I may begin, did you know that, I'm sure you knew that when you were elected, because of the system in which you received superannuation, you wouldn't be paid anything for the job that you're about to do?
That is exactly right. The Commonwealth Parliamentary scheme under which I'm paid gets adjusted according to what I might be earning from the state scene. And so I don't earn any extra money, but I have whatever extra responsibilities come my way.
And did you mention that in the campaign?
Oh, well, some people I didn't deliberately, but some people tried to have a crack at me on the basis that I was somehow double dipping. And I then had to advise them that the exact opposite was the truth. And that, in fact, there was no monetary gain whatsoever for me, but motivated by a sense of service, which first got me involved in politics, has burned and remained within me all this time. And pleased to be back in harness, and this time not to serve the full state, but I'm sure I will do that as well, but being devoted to a particular part of the state, namely the electorate of Franklin, in which I've lived since my primary school days.
Well, congratulations on your win, which I gather that you topped the Liberal vote in that electorate.
Yes.
And thank you for doing that service to Tasmania and the nation.
The indications are I'm leading at the moment. There are still more votes to come in, but at this stage it looks as though I will relatively comfortably be the top vote getter for the Liberal team in Franklin. We field a team of 7 candidates, and it's up to the electorate to determine who they vote for. So, David, the Liberal Party does not put out a how to vote ticket saying 1 for this person, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All the Liberal Party does is asks people vote 1 to 7 in the Liberal team. So what you have is the electorate making the determination as to who they want elected, and I was very honoured to be allowed to top the poll by wish of the electorate that voted Liberal.
It sounds like a very commendable part of the Hare-Clark system that the voters themselves determine the order rather than the party. I think that's a very good idea. Now,
well, David, if I might say, that for me was particularly validating because, as you know, in the Senate, it is the party that orders the ticket, and that is what saw my demise. And there were certain elements, David, and I know I have to look forward, and I am looking forward and will look forward to the tasks ahead. But it is nice to reflect, to say to the naysayers who said, oh, Eric could never win a seat in his own right, that just because he's number 1 on the Senate ticket that gets him elected. And so I was dumped down the ticket, and now here I am freewheeling as a free agent, and the electorate, in fact, did elect me as number 1 from the seat of Franklin for the Liberal team. So somewhat validating, but I've got to put that behind me and get on with the task that is ahead.
I think you make a very good point there. It's almost impossible, if you're in a low position on a party ticket, it's almost impossible to get into office because it requires people to vote below the line. And people now find it so complicated that they dare not do it. People seem to be almost terrified to vote below the line in relation to the Senate because of the vast numbers of candidates there.
At the last Senate election, I got 13% of the Liberal Senate vote below the line, which was a fairly handsome number of votes, but of course not enough to get you over the line.
Yes.
So I was touched by that, and it was for me an indication that the people might actually want me to continue to serve in the Parliament, and I now serve in the state Parliament, and I'm looking forward to that challenge.
It was a Liberal victory, was it not? But the vote did fall for the Liberal Party, and I assume it also fell for the Labor Party. Would that be correct?
The trend at this stage suggests that the Liberal Party vote collapsed quite considerably by about 12%. That 12% at this stage looks as though Labor may have gained 1%, the Greens by a similar amount. The real winner in all this is the Jackie Lambie network and independents, who will clearly hold the balance of power. It looks as though at this stage the Liberal Party will hold 15 out of the 35 seats, the Labor Party 10, and looks as though the Jackie Lambie network will get 3 seats. So if we can have an arrangement with the Jackie Lambie network, 15 plus 3 equals 18, which gives us a majority on the floor of the House. But voting needs to continue, preferences allocated, and we'll see whether that prediction is correct or not.
How significant do you think it is that we only have one Liberal government in this nation?
That's a reflection, I think, on where the Liberal Party has taken itself in recent years. And as a former Prime Minister, Tony Abbott said, Labor light, Liberals lose, and that is what has been the case right around the country. And I think there is a willingness in the electorate to reward Liberals and the Liberal Party if it stands by the Menzies values on which it was founded. And I was even mentioned, in fact, in Anthony Albanese's speech during the Labor launch here in Tasmania, that the worst possible result could be having me in the state Parliament. And one of the state Labor MPs was saying there's no room for a bloke like a Betts in the state Parliament. Very inclusive, of course, and very tolerant, but it was nearly reminiscent of Hillary Clinton's deplorables comment for
Well
the Trump
put.
supporters. And I did have the opportunity on local radio to thank Mr Albanese and the Labor Party for providing me with the notoriety and publicity that, quite frankly, money could not have bought. And of course, for the Liberal voter, if the Prime Minister particularly targets you, a Labor Prime Minister targets you, then most people think, well, must be worth his money and worth a vote. That said, I thought it particularly demeaning of a Prime Minister to engage in such low-level personal commentary. But that said, he did me a great favour, and I am indebted to him for the publicity that he provided.
It mirrors what's happening to Donald Trump, doesn't it, in a way that all of that activity against him, the legal activity against him, is only strengthening his position. Tasmania.
And look, when it's so over the top, like it is with Donald Trump, and as Anthony Albanese foolishly did with me, it has a negative response and reaction in the electorate, and you then gain more support as a result. So big miscalculation by the Democrats and the prosecutors and others in the United States, and on a lot more minor a scale, a big miscalculation by Mr Albanese and the Labor Party and their attacks on me, which only helped me. So once again, I thank them for it.
Very good. Now, Tasmania, of all the states of Australia, Tasmania is a state rich in renewable energy in your great hydro system. You'd be even richer, wouldn't you, but for the Hawke government?
Yes, look, it is one of those funny things. But first, the Abetts family moved out to Tasmania for my father to work on the hydro schemes. But during that debate in 1983, Bob Hawke promised at that election not to build the Gordon Below Franklin hydro scheme. And at the time, Bob Brown, who was head of the Wilderness Society, told Tasmanians, and this is a wonderful, wonderful reminder for people, that Tasmania had enough coal in the Fingal Valley for a coal-fired power station, and as a result, we didn't have to mess up the wilderness by putting in a dam and having hydro power. And of course, there he was demonstrating against hydro power. Today, he'd be up outside that coal-fired power station demanding that which he suggested be closed down. But consistency has never been their strong point.
Well, I can tell you that in Sydney, had they not disturbed the wilderness and built the Warragamba Dam, with the increased population of Sydney because of this out-of-control immigration, we would be having extreme water rationing in the city. What's your position, Eric, in relation to the allocation of the GST? When they brought the GST in, I thought it was to replace state taxes and that each state would get what it collected from the GST, but it seems to be modified.
Yeah, yes, it is modified, and that was always part of it. The goods and services tax, its distribution, I think it does need to be modified and adjusted from time to time. But part of it is that it looks at the trend income and that can change. So Western Australia, for example, when it was in a bit of a tough time, it got extra GST money. Then all of a sudden it got a huge influx of royalties from its mineral wealth, but it was still being paid GST on the basis of lower economic activity. And the reverse was in Tasmania when we were in the doldrums, when we were in recession because of a Labor Green minority government. Then when the Hodgman government got in, we still got paid on the basis of an economy that was in recession, albeit we were lifting substantially. So adjustments need to be made from time to time. No method is perfect, but having that equalising factor does help the states to budget to a certain extent, but clearly not a perfect system, and I doubt we'll ever get one, David.
One of the most important powers in relation to a state is education. And I'm not sure what the situation is in Tasmania, but when you look at the results in New South Wales, the standards are falling significantly in relation to literacy and numeracy, particularly when these are compared with overseas countries. Singapore, for example, they seem to be doing very well. One of the weaknesses seems to be that we put a lot of money into education and we don't get the results. Is that also a problem in Tasmania?
It's a huge problem in Tasmania, and it appears as though as expenditure increases, the results decrease, which tells me that educational outcomes are not related to expenditure, but what actually happens in the classroom and with curriculum and what head office requires of teachers and schools. We seem to be so busy teaching our children that they're going to be fried because of climate change within the next year or two, or that they're living on stolen land and that they should feel guilty about that, rather than teaching them that 1 + 1 = 2, and that they are very blessed to live in a country where every night most of them can go to bed with a full stomach in a clean bed, warm bed, where the blessings in this country just are just so way above what so many other people in the rest of the world experience. So we should be teaching our children that they are blessed to live in the country that they do, rather than all this negativity, which is so destructive for our society at large, but also for individuals and especially young school children who have this sort of legacy in their mind of, oh, I'm living on stolen land, and the current generation are about to burn us up on climate change. It's not doing them a favour at all, and it's filling their heads with things that are destructive and not beneficial for their future and for career opportunities. So Tasmania once boasted a very good state education system, and I would like to think I'm one of the products of that good system. I was state school educated throughout, but my children did not go to state schools because the system had slipped so badly, and I would like to see that being altered, being turned around, so that our children can get a very good education in Tasmania. And we'll see what happens as to whether this government now can start turning that ship around. It's a big ship, a big cultural change will be needed, David, but we do need to get that change happening.
This is so important. I can remember from my education, I went to a very ordinary primary school, and I have no doubt that every boy in quite a large class was numerate and literate, because we had to perform, we had to read aloud, we had to work out calculations on the blackboard, and there wasn't a boy in that class of whom you could say was not literate and not numerate. And the problem now, as you rightly say, is we are falling down, and it's not the children's fault. It's not that they are inferior to the children of the past. It's just that the educational system requires that in the classroom they be educated and that there be discipline. Without those, you cannot have good education. Well, I think you're going to do a wonderful job in the new government, and no doubt I'd be very surprised if you yourself are not a minister in that government. I do congratulate you and hope that you'll be available to talk to us from time to time about what is happening in Tasmania.
Oh, I'd be delighted to, and thank you very much, and I look forward to the challenge that awaits me in the state parliament.
Well, I would wish you well in that, because it's going to be significant. Just forming the government is obviously going to be significant, but compromises will have to be made, and that's how coalitions work, and that will no doubt come out well. And I do think that you will be playing I know you will be playing a significant role in the government of Tasmania. Thank you.
Well, I had experience of trying to manage the differing views in the Senate when I was leader of the Senate, and I still remember when the Abbott government won in 2013 and the Senate result became known, I said it would be like herding cats, and I was immediately chastised that this was terribly disrespectful to the newly elected senators. So I then changed my language to saying that they're all God's children, and I love them all, and I would look after them all very carefully. And to a large extent, we got most of the things through the Senate that we needed to, but it does make life a lot more difficult when you have to cater to the whims and wishes of a crossbench.
Well, on that point, thank you very much for your time today, Senator Betts.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.